Vice President Mike Pence and incumbent Senator Kamala Harris from the state of California. So we're going to do a deep dive analysis of what is going on in that race, taking a look at the things that have happened in this race, and looking at the debate and do an in-depth analysis of how it went, looking at the things that might help or hurt both campaigns, and look at the key policies that were talked about during this presidential debate and truly what shapes up the this presidential or vice presidential debate between these two big American politicians. Before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. So at this point in time, I just want to start it off by going on and saying my first thoughts after watching this presidential debate, which I'm going to be honest with you, was very calm. It was a very civil debate in most ways. And in general, it was a pretty normal presidential debate. It kind of in that area, if we could call it that. You could call it the vice presidential debate, I guess, but it was very civilized. This debate was one of the most civilized we've seen in a very long time. And one big thing that we saw is that even in times that they wanted to scream at each other, they did it. One, because maybe both of the candidates were just a lot calmer than the two presidential candidates. But in addition, we had a very good moderator in Suzanne Page. She did pretty good at keeping the times and everything. Now, that comes with the ups and downs. She did keep the time and she was very adamant about keeping the time. You can't go over. If you go over, it's going to be the end of the world. She took the stance. She said, stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. Now, where was the issue with that? I think we saw a little bit of missing that debate factor in the debate since there was essentially a point in time that we really couldn't see them actually debating because there was very little room for response. Responses were 15 seconds, and both candidates, many points in the debates, were cut short. Overall, looking at my general insight right now, this debate was pretty toss up. Why? Because on one side, we had Kamala Harris, who did very good in attacking. She used any information and data she had about the Trump administration, used it against Vice President Pence, and really worded things in a way that truly made the vice president seem in a horrible way. On the other side, a lot of the things that she was saying may not have been completely accurate, and Mike Pence did something that Donald Trump failed to do in the last presidential debate. What was that? He was able to fact check and fact checked in a civilized manner. So the debate was pretty much a toss up because those two things are very important. Now, when it comes to building a connection with the American people, who is this going to impact more? I think at this point, for the Trump campaign, there is nowhere but up to go. They're at their lowest point in the polling numbers since even July, mid July, where they were very behind. Recent polling numbers have them up, down by 14%, 17% in the most one of the most recent, which is the worst right now for them. And overall, if you look at it, who's it going to help more? Probably going to help out more Pence and his campaign. And again, the impact is not going to be huge. However, we're seeing one key thing with this debate. It was very tight. And I think mostly it comes down to a couple things. Like I said, Mike Pence's very good rebuttals. They were very cut short because again, Susan Page was very tight when it came to a lot of those things. Now, here's the things I saw with Kamala that might have taken the lead away from her. She was the attack dog in a way, like Donald Trump was in the last debate. However, some of those fact checks really hurt her argument and made her seem like a liar. If I am correct, we saw a point in the debate when they were talking about fracking and the environment. During that point in time, we saw very key amount of things, and honestly, during that time, we saw kind of a very key aspect that Kamala Harris, if I'm correct, she had contradicted herself. She was saying it. She was not going to do that. She was not going to do this. And I think at this point in time, it was a very interesting thing to see. And I think honestly, that's something that really hurt her, the environmental argument And I think overall, comparing it to the last debate, it was very well organized on both sides of the aisle. So I'm just reading the chat right now. So hi to everyone that is in the chat. Want to know politics, so more, Howard, and the best entertainment. So the best entertainer says he thought Kamala Harris had the slight edge on this debate. It is quite possible. Now, it depends again how you picture these debates. The issues talked about in this debate were very, very hot topics. We saw very, very important things that we saw there that truly showed us what they did. Kamala definitely won. She was strong with the facts. Mike lied a lot. So that was what Nicholas Papa is shipping into the conversation. And again, we saw very crucial fact checks um, through 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 them. So I think at this point in time we saw from the Mike Pence. So those fact checks were very strong and they kind of invalidated the argument a little bit. However, just delivering the argument and things like that, it was a strong debate performance on both sides. A lot better than both sides. So I think honestly, that's something to take a clear look at. Now, what were the things discussed? I think honestly, compared to the past debate, it essentially was the same things discussed in the last debate plus foreign policy, which was a little bit interesting. But again, it seemed very repetitive because what was one thing about this debate that we're hearing? It was essentially the same things they're just saying Trump, Trump, Biden, Biden. It wasn't about anyone else. Those were the things. And yes, like once you know politics, was saying like the moderator I think was being maybe a little tad bit more unfair with Pence, but that could be also because he was running over time. No, I think with the aspect about this debate that I did not enjoy was the fact that the moderator was way too pushing the brakes, which I mean, it's necessary, and especially since we had this big mess of a debate last time, it was necessary. However, it took the aspect of the debate. So I think that's one big thing to see. So yeah, she interrupted more Pence that than what she did Kamala. This is a very interesting debate. I will tell you that. And I mean, the general feeling of the debate, we also saw a very more calm Mike Pence compared to what Donald Trump. Was this better than the first presidential debate? Entertainment wise, um, no, it wasn't. And I think one of the big things to know is that the first debate was pretty much pure entertainment, however you put it. Now, the thing to understand here is that truly this debate, when it came down to the policies, when it came down to having an argument in a civilized manner, when it came to discussing American things that need to be discussed, American policies, both domestic and foreign, those things truly, truly, truly were represented during this debate. And during this debate, we saw very important and crucial um, points being made on both sides of the aisle. They did a very, very good job at doing a lot of different things. And I think that was a very good thing that they ended up doing. So right now I have a guest on the live stream that I have invited, and he is one of my fellow political YouTubers here on the YouTube platform. It's Unbiased Election Predictions. So I wanted to welcome him. So you are live. So I wanted to give you a big welcome. So how are you?
All right, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Do you want me to just give my quick analysis on the debate?
Yeah.
So, the first thing I noticed was, I think we all noticed this, it was a lot more civil and productive than the presidential debate. But,
Absolutely.
but to be honest, I wasn't impressed with either candidate. I want to give a certain winner because, this wasn't as much of a wash as the first one was. But I think it's pretty clear. Both these candidates pivoted. Kamala wouldn't answer the packing the court question. Pence wouldn't answer the question about what would your role be in a peaceful transition of power. So I think they both pivoted way too much, and they both came off as politicians, which is not good
Mhm.
for either of them. But if I had to pick a winner, if you're going to drag me to the fire, I'd have to go with Kamala. I think Pence didn't do poorly. I just think that she was sharper. She had better one-liners. So So
Right.
that's my
So
take.
here is my cup of tea with the debate, and I kind of touched on base with this. Here, what we saw was a it was a very strong performance on both sides. Now, we did see a tendency, especially during the middle part of the debate. I remember, like, after the first topic, perhaps, they started to pivot away for some of these things. And look at the things they were talking about. And I think it was also just due to the general structure of the debate. This debate was well more organized, 1,000% than the first debate. It was very, very well organized. Now, what was the issue? We saw the moderator interrupting the candidates way too much. The aspect of a debate was not there. It was not very, very back and forth. There was only one response, back and forth, like it usually is, which became a little bit of a problem during the debate. So I think that was one of the things to talk about is that truly there was a lot of pivoting, especially when it came to answering questions, because the candidates were not giving enough time to give their opinions, voice what they were thinking, and show the American people what they were thinking. A lot more organized than the first debate, but perhaps not as well as the the arguments didn't come out as well. So I think like that's definitely like something that we do see. And I think at this point in time, that was a very big thing that we saw. And overall, with the structure of debate, if we're going to talk general structure of the debate, that is the general thing that we saw. So UEP, do you want to talk about like a little bit what you thought about the debate structure? How was the debate structured? How do you think the moderators did? And how do you think that generally speaking the debate was run in a way where giving candidates adequate time to speak, all those different things. So I think he disconnected. But meanwhile, I'm going to talk about this. So right now we're seeing a very crucial thing here. And like I've been saying, the debate structure was very well structured. Giving the arguments, all of that, very well structured. However, the issue became more when we got more towards the point of crossfire. So I think at this point in time, that was one of the things we saw. Now, when it pertains to general debate structure, who debated better? I think we saw two different attacks. So right now, first thing that we saw was that Kamala Harris used the strategy of someone that would attack. She was very attacked. She was on the offense during this debate. Now, the thing is that when it came to fact checking, when it came to maybe putting facts on the table, we saw Mike Pence very effectively put some facts at the table and present them in a different way, and even some were fact checked by the moderator, which acknowledged some of the facts, which again shows that Mike Pence had a very good fact checking strategy. So I think the simple way to go about this, Mike Pence, Mike Pence and Kamala Harris switch roles from the first presidential debate. So essentially, Kamala Harris took more of the approach Donald Trump took in the first presidential debate. Mike Pence took more of a Joe Biden approach in the first presidential debate, at least when it comes to forming arguments, when it comes to forming rhetoric, and like the way they speak and all those different things, which I think is truly very interesting analogy. Because going into this, I mean, we also knew that Kamala Harris was the more attackive, more offensive debater. And just looking at Mike Pence's debate in 2016, he is a very calm person debating. There was points in this debate where Kamala Harris was going very hard at Mike Pence, and truly, I did not see clear responses from Pence that were strong, that were showing a lot of um contrariety or believing other than what Kamala Harris was saying. And I think that was somewhat of a flaw in his arguments. However, the way he delivered like the facts and fact checking was very effective. So I mean, overall, I think that's one thing that maybe swings the power towards Kamala Harris. But right now, I want to talk about quickly what were some of the memorable moments of this debate. There truly weren't many. Like this debate is not going to be one you're going to remember for the rest of your life. It's probably going to be a very forgettable debate, and I think the moments weren't there. There's some things, I mean, that you could have said, well, maybe this, maybe that, but the moments weren't simply there. What did we see? We saw a very calm debate. And I mean, comparing it to the last debate, which was very insane, very crazy debate. I mean, this debate was very calm. There wasn't any fireworks. I think most memorable moments was um I think the most memorable moment was mostly when they started talking about some of the Green New Deal. That's probably going to be the thing that's going to get shown a lot in the highlights, because that was a very big fact check on Pence. So let's read the chat right now. So we have a chat from Good Stuff 101. He asked, "What did you think on of Pence overspeaking the time on multiple occasions?" So I think Pence was overspeaking, generally speaking, a little bit, but that there's also, I think, a little bit of reason. And when Kamala Harris overspoke, it was also because they needed more time, and that's what I've been saying. The problem with this debate, the way that it was structured, the moderator was very impulsive on the rules. In a general debate during the last 6 minutes, after both candidates have given through 2 minute uninterrupted speeches, it would be a back and forth. Now that failed, and essentially it was just full giving speeches, and it was essentially saying, "I believe my candidate is great. I believe your candidate sucks." It essentially became a instead of, "Well, my candidate is right because of this and this and this." It wasn't a conversation clearly. It was just putting a bunch of candidates speaking out their mind. It was a nice debate to hear, relatively simple debate. I mean, that is definitely true. And looking at it at a civility point of view, looking at it at a politician debate view, pretty good debate. It was pretty civil, which that's something we missed to see in the last presidential debate. However, how does that translate to impacting the election? Zero to none. This debate is really not going to matter. Although we could have thought this debate was going to affect the whole electoral map, and even if Mike Pence had the blow it out performance and he made Kamala Harris look completely horrible in the debate, I think we knew for a fact this debate was not going to have a big impact on the election. I think we all knew that. Now, when it comes to some of the things that we were seeing during this debate, I think they're truly just going to end up maybe helping Pence a little bit, and here's why. The Trump campaign at this point is at a very low point. They're losing by 14 points, 10 points, 17 points, depending how you look at it nationwide. And of course, those polling data and those things are very debatable at this point in time. And you could argue on both sides of the aisle. Now, the thing here is that since Pence could be a little bit more behind, and you could say he's falling a little bit more behind, we could say that at this point it's probably going to help him a little bit more. And I think Kamala Harris' performance was pretty good. However, since it wasn't blow it out of the park, it was in a home run. We're probably not going to see a huge impact on the electoral map. Basically, vote Trump for God, or vote Biden for China. That's an opinion. I'm not going to get into that. But right now, I think the debate was there's a lot of hot topics. Can ask, I think if Pence runs in 2020 election, Trump died. Do you think he can overturn Trump? I'm going to tell you, and I think no one should wish for the death of anyone, but I do not currently think that Donald Trump is going to die. Just the facts. Now, if he were to die in that unfortunate scenario, because again, one life lost to this virus is one too many, I think essentially is going to be the biggest hot mess for the Republicans. They're going to be, um, failing in some cases to take control of some of the areas they were winning by. They're going to have troubles in certain instances because, again, when you lose like your candidate in a way like that, the chances are things are going to go very bad. Why? Mostly because, organizational purposes. Donald Trump is what keeps the Republican Party together right now, in a way. And why has this administration been able to govern? Because he is the glue to this administration. If Donald Trump is removed from the equation, we could say that one, the Republicans, both at the presidential, senatorial, House level, are going to be a complete disaster. And for the most part, I think a lot of American people would say, why vote for a dead person? So I think that's something to keep in mind. Trump is not losing. That's what the damn fake media telling people said Clinton was up by 20 points when she wasn't. Well, Clinton wasn't up by 20 points, but here's the thing to understand. The polls this time, again, polls are very a thing that we can't tell because at this point in time, polls could definitely be right or they definitely can be wrong. These nationwide polls where we're seeing these 20-point leads, we won't really know because these represent all voters from the most liberal voters in California to the more conservative voters in Wyoming. That's what nationwide polling data represents. Now, what matters here? The electoral map. And just looking at recent electoral map scenarios and electoral map polling data, with what we're seeing a very bad trend for Trump. He's not completely out of the picture. However, things are narrowing down, and like for his pathways to victory, his pathways to victory are not really there. If Trump in 4 years brought back on track, then he could do more and better than Joe Biden, who would only be from South America. I mean, I think at this point in time, that's one of the things we saw in the debate. And this is starting to get into what each candidate talked about. During Vice President Mike Pence's debate segment, what was something that we saw? We saw a very big attack on Kamala Harris's record. We saw a very big attack on Joe Biden's record. And what were the things that were touched? Criminal justice system, the Green New Deal, as well as Biden's 47 years in government not doing anything argument. That's something that we clearly saw with Vice President Pence's attacks. But Vice President Pence had very few attacks, and they're very far between, and few and far between. And I think with some of the attacks that he had, it was mostly fact checking. He fact checked and tried to prove his point that truly Biden might have not done anything in the last 47 years compared to what Trump has done in the last four. That is an opinion. And if you look at it, facts and the way you interpret facts might be different, and that might constitute if you believe that's correct or not. However, I think with generally speaking, the way that Vice President Pence made it seem, he was talking, I think, in a way that he wasn't necessarily talking directly to the American people. That's one of his failures with this argument. Vice President Mike Pence somewhat failed a little bit to talk directly to the American people. Well, Kamala Harris excelled at that. Kamala Harris was able to do very, very well. She was talking directly to the American people. Yet there were some points in the debate, which I don't know if a lot of you remember this if you watched the debate, um, but there was a couple moments where she was talking to the American people, like saying things like debt is when you owe people money. I think that came up as a little bit arrogant in a way, like thinking maybe the American people are stupid, which I don't know if that's completely true, but I think it was like a little bit of a very interesting take on and the way that she delivered it and said it. So Ron asked, is it 269 scenario? I think at this point in time with how this debate went, um we're seeing the possibilities of a 269 scenario increase because again the election is getting closer anyways. However, we're still like very, very, very far behind from getting a 269 scenario. For a 269 scenario, everything has to align. That is one of thousands of possible electoral college scenarios. Or now that I think of it, there's only what 536 scenarios or 538. So yeah. So when it comes to who won the debate, that's a big question right now that a lot of people have. And we're seeing Philly thinks that Mike Pence won the debate. Our friend, um, Nicholas thinks that Kamala Harris won the debate. At this point in time, the this debate wasn't as as it wasn't as victory wise. Like we couldn't tell a clear winner. And compared to the last debate where we had a clear winner for speaking to the American people and presenting your arguments in a civil way, and the person who attacked and most effectively attacked. Here we saw a debate which, on both extremities, both candidates performed okay. It was an interesting debate to hear too, because again, after that very big firestorm of a debate that we had back last week, this was a very good treat. And I think at this point in time, what we're seeing here is a very strong debate performance. And some of the issues talked about that we saw, they were very interesting issues. And I think generally speaking, we're probably seeing a debate that was pretty tied up. Right now, I think it's pretty easy to say that there was a pretty strong debate performances on both sides. I've been saying this, but at this point in time, the way that Mike Pence delivered the arguments was a very strong way, and I will narrowly give the edge to Mike Pence. Those fact checking where he talked about fracking, he talked about the Green New Deal, he talked about the economy, very strong segments, in part by Mike Pence. And I think truly that's one of the things that gave him the debates. And that really ended up helping him out a lot. So let's read some of the messages we have in the chat. So Bionic Bastard says, "Truth wins again. Truth will always win. Go look up Joe Biden and Kamala on fracking, taxes, and everything." That is true, and we saw clearly that during the debate, those claims about the fracking, the taxes, they were well delivered by Mike Pence. And at this point, Kamala Harris took him in a way where she was dodging questions. And that's one big trend we saw on both sides, dodging questions. And it was worse than the first debate. We saw countless times again. Both candidates were not wanting to answer questions directly. They started to move away from what they were supposed to answer, and they just instead decided to talk about whatever other random thing they just wanted to say. Keep that in mind, that truly the candidates did not have a consistent um answering questions. They were very all over the place when it came to that. But when they did give counter arguments, I think Mike Pence was generally stronger. And as Mega points out in the chat, Mike Pence has proven to be a strong debater. In 2016, Tim Kaine wasn't the strongest debater, and truly Mike Pence's performance was pretty normal. It wasn't great, it wasn't amazing. During this debate, both candidates had pretty good performances. However, I think that overall, those a couple claims they really did it for Kamala. Kamala did very well when it came to attacking and distorting. Because again, you're these politicians. What really happened doesn't matter in these debates. It's the way that you present it. The way that you present the information, the way you make the other side seem, is what the American people are going to think when they go cast their ballots. Kamala Harris was effective as planting Mike Pence as this horrible person, Mike planting Donald Trump as this horrible person. But we saw Mike Pence do a very good job at counter argument, like we're saying. And we have a lot of people in the chat saying that Mike Pence won the debate. And truly, it's something that's very interesting, and it's something that really does depend on what you think. And I mean, Kamala Harris did a pretty good job debating. Not to say that she did, because Kamala Harris is a strong debater. Now, where was her on flaws missing? Where they called out her facts, she couldn't back it up. And that's one thing that we saw with Joe Biden. He didn't talk about things. And I think there's specific questions about the Green New Deal, especially, where, because that was the segment about fracking, the general segment on the economy, on whether they thought it was right or wrong to not do that. I think overall, that was very interesting to see that Kamala Harris was able to somewhat hold her ground. But however, I mean, with environmental issues, the way they presented the arguments, again, Mike Pence did pretty well. I think if there's one segment, and like the segment that Kamala Harris performed the best and even won, because she was pretty close or even winning in some of the segments, I would definitely say COVID-19 handling. She hammered Mike Pence. However, we saw Mike Pence again, very strong counter arguments with H1N1 that had 60 million cases. That was his claim, which was true. 60 million Americans had contracted H1N1. And I think at this point in time, we saw the big, that was a very big claim, and it was a very strong claim against Kamala Harris in her positions. I feel like people who voted for Trump in 2016 because he had Pence, well, it looks like Pence hold on to those voters. I think that's true. And I think the other day I was talking to one of my history teachers, and they were talking about how Mike Pence might just be one of the smartest men on earth because he is the second man in command. He doesn't get the blame for doing a lot of these different things in office. However, he is probably one of the people that makes the most decisions for the Trump administration. He is probably the most experienced person, I guess, in the like cabinet, I guess, when it comes to like kind of leading everything. And I think overall, Mike Pence just has a lot of political experience. A lot of people like him because he's very conservative, which he is. And I think during this debate, we saw a lot of his conservative ideals come back and show themselves, in addition to presenting the argument to the American people in a proper way. But something Mike Pence should have brought bring up: Harris bailing out a guy who raped an 8-year-old. Yes, I think that's definitely a thing that he could have said. Now I think that would have been an easy get out, like in Harris, because it would have been like it was a thing where we just donated and I just put a link for the Black Lives Matter protest, which wasn't a big issue this debate. They narrowly touched on it. We talked about police brutality a little bit on Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Overall, we didn't see anything crazy. And again, this debate was pretty boring, pretty status quo, generally speaking, because truly, what were the most memorable moments where we say we're going to remember this forever, like the white supremacist moment in the last debate, or you're not going to call a pack the Supreme Court, which again, the packing the Supreme Court was something that really definitely hurt Kamala Harris because that was a very simple yes or no answer. She could have easily said, I'm not going to pack the Supreme Court. She failed to answer that, and that was one of the points in times where she was dodging the question. At that specific moment in time, I think it's pretty safe to say that it was a very tough question, and I think it's definitely very possible that that Kamala Harris probably didn't want to answer the question because maybe it could have been against what she said in the past. And I think it's honestly a lot of contradicting from what we're seeing from the Biden campaign in general, a lot of contradicting from things like in the campaign website and things like that. So I think that's one thing to keep up in mind. And overall, Kamala Harris did a pretty decent job. I would say like her debate, both of their debate performances was better than both of Trump and I guess Trump and Biden. Now I think they both performed well. I think Pence narrowly edged it out. Again, it also depends how you look at it. So, I mean, that's truly what we saw during this debate, and I think many interesting things that we actually did end up seeing. Overall, we're currently seeing a pretty interesting race, and they talked about one of the big issues of this campaign, which is what some voters have in mind is what's next in politics. And in this case, it was more of a thing of what would happen if your candidate, the person you're supporting, ends up having some sort of illness in this case, gets incapacitated, and they can't really perform any more of their presidential duties. What essentially happens? So I think essentially that part, none of them answered the question really. They just said they have the same views and morals, which I think is true. But I think that's something they should have answered because when it comes to the role of the vice president, that is one of the things that's most crucial. Taking control after your commander in chief can no longer hold office. That's one thing they did not answer. Mike DeMonte said, she said none of the 50 federal judges Trump were black, not Trump's cabinet. That was true about the federal judges. I think truly that claim, it was strong, but like I think here's like one of the things, and I think Mike Pence could have easily brought this up, is bringing race into the argument, and he could have said that it would have been like a counter argument, but I think like generally speaking, it was a very interesting claim on her part. David Cruz says both did fine. It just was the last debate was crazy, and there was a lot of pressure from Pence, and he handled it. It's fine that that's right. Pence had a very very good handling of the debate because truly, Pence, I thought since when we knew there were going to be these debates, he wasn't going to go off the rails. Well, Harris kind of was the kind of candidate to go off the rails. And in general, if we could like give the analogies and say both I guess, so we could say Kamala Harris kind of took the approach Donald Trump took the debate. Pence took the approach of Biden in the sense of how they presented themselves, how they presented their argument to the American people. And I think overall, very close debate. Certain things Pence did very well. certain things he did bad. Kamala Harris, certain things he did very well in, certain things she did not do very well in, and I think that is truly a thing that we must analyze. And overall, there were some issues and some questions they both could have taken a lot better. There's questions they kind of dodged in entirety, and I think again that was like a little bit of the flaw of this debate. This debate was like 10 times better than the last debate, if not 1,000 times better. But there is one flaw, and again, no debate is going to be perfect, even if it's super organized. I think what we saw here was the moderator having to put in too much of their input. They had to stop the candidates from talking, which again takes out a little bit of the purpose from the debates. So let me read the chat right now. So people are saying, like Mike are saying, it was a tie. Tony is saying if people needed assurance that Senator Harris could serve as VP, they got it. If people need assistance that she could serve as president, she was far overshadowed by Pence. I think that is definitely true. And what we saw here was Kamala Harris took the approach of someone that would like be a good vice president, being consistent with what their running mate is saying, being consistent with the things the administration is saying, being consistent with the things that they've been discussing. With Pence, we saw a lot more of a very presidential look. What was one of the most presidential moments we saw from Pence? It was that last question. So I don't know if you guys remember, but during the last question of the debate, it was a question asked by an 8th grade student at a middle school in Utah. It was regarding about the media and how essentially they needed to unite the country. So the way that Pence answered the question was kind of directly looking at, for example, imagine this was a conversation and Pence was in the same room with a little girl. He was essentially talking to the girl straight in the eye almost, talking about how the country needed to unite. Well, Harris tried doing that, but she took a political approach. The question was about how do we stop from being so politicized and just unite about him as an American? Harris failed to answer that question, and that shows that maybe she was overshadowed in that department. So, Pence did excellent, but Kamala also did pretty well. I think that that's pretty good. If you have been following what's really going on, you know Pence would get one. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, if you look at the way they presented the facts and things like that, Pence definitely won. However, I would give Kamala Harris some points for attacking, even though those attacks weren't completely factually accurate. Just the way that she presented it and made it seem to the American people was very good. I think Kamala Harris, she took at some point in time, I don't know, but because of the glass, I guess, we could see during like one of the camera angles when Pence was speaking what Kamala Harris's faces were. She was making some facial expressions, which I looked like a little bit more like mocking expressions. And I think again, overall, if we took this as who would serve as a good vice president, I think both of them did pretty well. Who acted more presidential? I think in this case, it goes to Pence. And I mean, who could act more presidential doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. Because we could say in the last debate, Donald Trump acted a lot less presidential than Joe Biden. And here we saw a very good performance from Mike Pence. And I think if anything, like a lot of people are mentioning in the chat, this could really bring up a Pence election for 2024. And I think he could definitely be a contender. This debate truly showed us what a leader Pence can be. Kamala Harris is a strong leader as well. But we saw maybe some of the more hypocritical actions in a way. And of course, the Democratic Party has been running. They've been saying, they've been doing all these different things, saying that the Republicans are hypocrites. But during this debate, Mike Pence made it clear and showed it in ways with the facts that he had that were then fact-checked essentially by the moderator. We saw Pence do a very good job to get those facts. Not only get the facts, but as well present them in a way which made Kamala Harris look at the person who was not telling the truth. There was countless of times that Kamala Harris was saying, Donald Trump is a liar, Mike Pence is part of that administration, so he's also a liar. But during those moments, we saw very strong responses from Pence. They were cut short, and for the most part, Pence took longer time to respond. Kamala Harris was speaking a little more accelerated. She was speaking faster. Mike Pence took his time speaking, which again could have really helped him. Like independent politics is saying, I think you got that right on the nose. Kamala killed Pence on COVID. Pence focused on exotic strides and accomplishments. You meant the economy. I think during the economy and the environment, I think Pence really hit it hard with Harris. With foreign policy, I think Pence did pretty well, and I think the Trump administration has a record to prove with foreign policy, whether it be foreign policy to Southern America, where they've been taking care of some of these governments, or whether it be to the Middle East, that big, lucrative peace deal amongst those three nations in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and if I'm correct, Israel. So that is something for the Republicans to brag about. That is something they should be campaigning avidly about. It also happens to be that this debate isn't truly about foreign policy because it truly isn't. However, if we take a look at it, I think those segments were especially where um, Pence did very well. So, Dimitri, I think right now we're looking at a debate that was pretty tied, maybe swinging a little bit towards Pence. The reasons like that they were tied is because Kamala Harris did a very good job at attacking and presenting and maybe manipulating at a point the facts of the debate to make the Republicans seem very bad. Which again, not that done politically, not completely factual. And I mean, with Pence, we saw very strong rebuttals. I think that's what Pence really did, and I think that might have shown the American people what Pence was about. Now, here's the thing: this could have been great and whatever. Pence could have had the best performance in the world. This is truly not going to impact the election. This is a very symbolic event. This is more about showing and maybe deciding it, making voters decide. Although now that I'm thinking about it and saying it out loud, there is a chance that this vice presidential debate might have a bigger impact than those in the past. Considering that the first presidential debate was a very big political circus, usually a debate where people choose their minds, maybe this gave people an insight of what real policy would look like. And perhaps this could set up both candidates for future runs. So okay, I think that with the endorsement that of he's dog the CIA, Pence scrambled to save himself on Russian foreign policy. Yeah, I think we also saw that with foreign policy. He had like a lot of talked about. Like he had a couple things on his like resume to talk about. Overall, with the Russia and foreign interference thing, I think one point that he could have easily made was the last week's information about the Senate Intelligence Committee getting information from the Director of National Intelligence about general things in the Intelligence or the Judiciary Committee, if I'm correct. Yeah, the Judiciary Committee, where they got very. I think that would have been a very easy save, saying that that was a setup, and I think he also talked about that. So I think that's something very interesting. I found Pence more capable than Trump. Yeah, so I think right now, I think one thing that we must talk about is maybe Pence perhaps is probably like Scene gave up more of a presidential vibe than President Trump. He gave up more of a presidential feeling, the way that he spoke, the way he presented the things. However, I think at the end of the day, um, again, they're not going to be able to do anything about it. And even though I think at this point in time, I think definitely Pence sounded very presidential. And again, Harris, she acted very professionally. However, she didn't speak more about like her own record. She always referred okay. Here's the thing with Harris. For the most part, she was saying Biden this, Biden that. With Pence, you also have the Trump this, Trump that, but he was also giving answers as himself. The debate wasn't between Joe Biden surrogate and Donald Trump surrogate. It was between Vice President Pence and Senator Harris. Mike Pence did a very good job at doing that. Overall, I'm gonna have to give the victory slightly to Mike Pence. Very, very strong debate on both sides. And as we get closer to election day, we might see some of these issues that might come into play and come into the eye of the American people more and more. And it's going to be very crucial for Americans to decide based on policy, based on the character of the person they're going to vote for. And I think one thing that became clear in this debate, like Ron is saying, Pence is a politician, and this debate was between two politicians. Trump is a businessman. And that is one of the things that we saw during this debate. It became a very big contrast. A lot of the things that Kamala had to say were against Trump, not against Pence. Truly, that's one of the biggest issues that she had, because she really couldn't attack Mike Pence on many things. But Mike Pence had a whole list of her records of things he could have said about her, and he effectively used that. So I think at this point in time, that might have given him the edge. Overall, it was a very interesting debate, and who knows if we're gonna have more debates because of COVID-19, and that outbreak within the White House, and then also with the interesting things that we have since it's a town hall that's going to be interesting to see. And there's a chance we just might cancel the second presidential debate. And the third, perhaps we might have it definitely, but that's not for sure. So this might have been kind of the last debate. However, very strong performance by Mike Pence. Kamala Harris did very well. I think she undermined a little bit of the of the things like she talked about Kamala Harris. And overall, I think it was a very strong debate. I want to read right now a little bit more of the chat and talk about some of the things that you guys did. Yes, Harris did nothing to hurt Biden, so Biden keeps the lead. You're right. Now, I think with it's not what Harris did or did not do. I think in this point, it's what Pence did. Pence was able to attack a little bit like Biden and essentially point out maybe some hypocrisy, and not necessarily that I agree or disagree with that, but I think essentially with that, we saw very strong rebuttals, and they might have hurt Biden a little bit, but not astronomically. Bionic Bastard says, my family and our Dems, and I think it's safe to say both sides are in the position. Yeah, I think at this point, Russia is a tired topic on both sides. And I think it's definitely, like, we've talked about it, they've investigated, they found nothing. And right now, we're seeing the thing with the intelligence community, so that's something else. And overall, again, I'm going to wrap it out right now. Interesting debate, and I hope you guys enjoyed the debate and this presidential debate analysis. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, so please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to be updated with our latest content. Hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye. I want everyone to have a good night and stay safe from the COVID-19 pandemic, because apparently I think that's a thing we have to say now. So bye, guys. Hope you have a very good night.